Rafael Nadal, one of the fiercest competitors tennis has ever known, was caught on camera in tears. Not after a loss, and not during some emotional interview years after retirement. He was sitting at home in Mallorca, watching a 20-year-old girl from the Philippines fall to the ground on the other side of the world, racket still in her hand, tears streaming down her face. And Rafa simply broke down. The video exploded across the internet. Millions of views within just a few hours. People who hadn't followed tennis in years suddenly couldn't stop watching. Everyone was asking the exact same question. Who is she, and why does she matter so much to him? I'm about to tell you, and I promise the truth goes much deeper than you might expect. Picture the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca. Sun-soaked clay courts, strict schedules, and elite young players from across Europe pushing themselves through exhausting daily training beneath a Mediterranean sky that offers no mercy. This was never a soft place. It was built on grit, repetition, and the belief that champions are forged, not simply discovered. In 2016, a 12-year-old girl from Manila walked through those gates carrying one bag and a dream that was probably far too big to fit inside it. Her name was Eala, and almost nobody knew what to expect from her. She was quiet. She was young. She came from a country where tennis barely dominates the national conversation, where resources are limited, and where the path to professional tennis is genuinely, structurally tougher than what most European juniors would ever have to face. No famous family name, no generational connection to the sport, and no safety net of any kind. What she had was a scholarship and the willingness to endure whatever it took for something she truly loved. The academy doesn't make things easier for scholarship athletes. If anything, the expectations are even higher. Every morning, you wake up and prove you belong against players backed by family money, established coaching systems, and connections that stretch throughout the European junior circuit. Eala kept training anyway. She lost matches she should have won. She would make her way back to a dorm room in a foreign country, exhausted and sometimes completely heartbroken, only to return the next morning before the sun was fully up, ready to do it all over again. That kind of quiet, stubborn, unshakable determination doesn't go unnoticed, not even by one of the greatest champions tennis has ever produced. Through his own tournaments, comebacks, and battles with injuries, Rafael Nadal began paying attention to her progress. Nothing official at first, no courtside clipboard, no formal coaching arrangement, he simply watched. And what he saw in this young Filipino player reminded him of something from his own early days on those same courts. She didn't break under pressure. She took it in, turned it into strength, and used it to move forward. By 2022, she had become a junior Grand Slam champion, winning the Australian Open girls title with a style of tennis that left commentators reaching for words beyond their usual vocabulary. By 2023, she was stepping onto the professional circuit, facing opponents who were older, stronger, more experienced, and ranked hundreds of places above her in almost every measurable category. She lost many of those matches. She came back every single time. Nobody handed Eala a single point she hadn't fought for with everything she had. Then came March 2025, the Miami Open, one of the biggest hard-court events on the WTA calendar. Eala entered as a wild card, ranked number 140 in the world. Statistically, she had no reason to be in that draw. It was filled with former Grand Slam champions, established top 10 players, and stars who had competed at the highest level for years. Then she defeated Madison Keys in the second round. Calm, composed, and remarkably clinical for her age. The tennis world started to take notice. She defeated Jelena Ostapenko in the third round, a former Roland Garros champion whose explosive and unpredictable ball striking can overwhelm even experienced professionals. Eala adjusted during the match, stayed composed under pressure, and walked off the court having handled the challenge. At that point, the tennis world was paying serious attention. Then came the quarterfinal. Iga Swiatek, world number 2 and a multiple Grand Slam champion, widely regarded as one of the most dominant forces in women's tennis over the previous 3 years. She was the kind of player whose mental consistency had broken down opponents across every surface and in almost every condition imaginable. Eala defeated her in straight sets. The tennis internet went into overdrive. Clips appeared across every platform almost instantly. Former players publicly shared their amazement. Broadcast journalists struggled to find the right words. The word generational started appearing throughout commentary feeds, so often that it seemed nobody had a better description. Then came the private message. Rafael Nadal, who had officially retired from professional tennis the previous November in a farewell ceremony that left the sport genuinely heartbroken, reached out to her directly. The message itself wasn't made public right away, but during a brief post-match interview that went viral within minutes, she spoke about hearing from Rafa with an expression that felt deeply personal, overwhelming, and completely genuine. She said she was grateful. She explained that his words meant more to her than she could fully express in a press conference. The world understood anyway because everyone who had watched her that week had already seen it. The left-handed forehand packed with topspin and controlled aggression, the refusal to give up baseline exchanges, and the almost unbelievable ability to raise her level when the pressure became nearly unbearable. She played like someone who had learned the right lessons at the deepest level. Not from a coaching manual, but from a man who had lived every principle she was now showing on court. Rafa had passed that understanding on to her years before this moment. Miami was simply the moment the world finally saw what all that work had produced. June 2025, Eastbourne, England, during the grasscourt season just 2 weeks before Wimbledon. Eala reached the final, and championship points arrived. She was just one shot, one clean and executable shot, away from winning her first WTA title. She missed it. Then she missed the next one, and the match suddenly turned. Momentum disappeared with the precise cruelty that only tennis can create. The opponent stepped forward. The crowd, which had been loudly supporting her, fell tense and quiet, that unmistakable silence that comes when something painful is unfolding and nobody can do anything to stop it. She had lost. She sat in her chair at the changeover and cried. Not controlled tears, not emotions carefully managed for the cameras. She cried. The way someone cries after giving everything they had and still coming up short, raw, unfiltered, and completely human. It had nothing to do with strategy, appearances, or professional expectations. The cameras caught everything. The clip spread almost instantly. And in Mallorca on his phone, Rafael Nadal saw it too. He reshared the footage with a few simple words. Words that, depending on your relationship with sport, with loss, and with the particular pain of coming so close, can tighten your chest, bring tears to your eyes, or both at once. She will be backed at no analysis, no advice on how she could improve, and no carefully prepared public statement. Just 4 words from a man who had experienced Wimbledon final defeats of his own, who understood the pain of losing championship points from both sides of the emotional divide, and who knew exactly what Alexandra Eala was carrying in that moment. He wanted her and everyone watching to hear one clear and undeniable truth. She would be back. The comments reached hundreds of thousands within just 2 days. Tennis fans, Filipino supporters, Nadal followers, and even people who couldn't name a single current player on tour all gathered beneath those 4 words and the powerful message they carried. September 2025, Guadalajara, Mexico, a WTA 250 event. Late-season hard courts, the kind of tournament where careers can quietly change direction through results that don't always receive the attention they deserve. Eala entered the final after grinding through a 3-set semi-final the day before. She was visibly exhausted. Neutral observers were cautious. Talented, yes. Miami was certainly on her resume. But finals carry a psychological pressure that no amount of previous experience can fully prepare you for. Eastbourne had already shown that. She lost the first set. For about 8 minutes into the second, it looked like the same story might repeat itself. The opponent sensed the opening and began building points with growing confidence. The crowd became quieter, and then something shifted inside Alexandra Eala. No one watching could identify the exact moment. There was no dramatic gesture, no visible release, and no coaching intervention. She simply changed. The hesitation of the first set disappeared, replaced by something controlled, fierce, and completely decisive. Her opponent suddenly had no comfortable ground to stand on. Eala won the second set. She won the third. And she won the championship. And when the final point landed and the reality of what she had achieved finally hit her, 3 years of sacrifice, dormitory nights in Mallorca, junior losses, professional setbacks, Miami victories, and Eastbourne heartbreak all seemed to arrive at once. Alexandra Eala dropped to the court, her face buried in her hands, with her racket lying beside her, completely overwhelmed by the moment. She stayed there for a long time. The crowd in Guadalajara gave her every second of that moment. And in Mallorca, the retired champion who had spent years passing on his principles, competitive mindset, and genuine belief in this young player watched the footage on his screen and felt something deeply emotional. The video of Rafa's reaction went viral within the hour. Tens of millions of views followed, with headlines appearing across more than 40 countries. Journalists who covered tennis, and even those who didn't, were all writing the same sentence in different languages. Rafael Nadal broke down watching Eala win. November 2025. Exactly 12 months after one of the most emotional retirements in professional tennis history, Rafael Nadal stepped back onto a practice court. No tournament, no cameras, no media obligation or PR arrangement. Just practice clothes, 2 rackets, and one other person, Eala. They practiced together for 2 hours. What emerged afterward, through sources close to both of them and eventually through Eala herself in a candid interview, was a session that was technical yet emotional, structured yet spontaneous, professional yet deeply personal all at once. Nadal worked specifically on her forehand, grip pressure, point of contact, follow-through angle, and weight transfer into the ball, focusing on the mechanics that create topspin without sacrificing directional control. These weren't abstract concepts. These were the precise details that separate a good forehand from a truly exceptional one. Details Nadal had spent 20 years perfecting on clay, grass, and hard courts against the best opponents the sport had ever produced. He was giving her the blueprint. Eala said afterward that she spent parts of the session trying to convince herself it was actually happening. The person standing across the net, feeding her balls and giving technical feedback with the authority of someone who owns 22 Grand Slam titles, was the same person whose name was on the building around them. She described one specific moment, a rally where Nadal demonstrated the forehand technique himself, was still moving with the careful control of a man protecting surgically repaired joints, yet he struck the ball with a quality that reminded everyone watching why the conversation about the greatest players always comes back to his name. She said she stopped moving completely. She simply watched and let the ball pass by. He laughed and told her to keep playing. She said she almost couldn't. That clip traveled differently from the Guadalajara video. It was less explosive and more tender. The strongest reactions came from ordinary people. Fans who had genuinely mourned Nadal's retirement, who had felt his absence from the tour as something personal, were suddenly seeing him back on a court, not competing, but passing his knowledge on. Giving everything he had learned to the person he believed was most capable of carrying it forward. The torch hadn't simply been passed. It had been shared and strengthened together. Rafael Nadal broke down crying. Eala lifted the trophy, and the world seemed to pause as two people, separated by nationality, by generations, and by a retirement ceremony that had once felt so final, shared one extraordinary moment that tennis had never quite witnessed before. This isn't a story about one match, one viral clip, or one emotional reaction caught on someone's phone. It's a story about what happens when genuine belief meets genuine effort, quietly, without glamour, across a full decade of work, and finally reaches the eyes of the entire world. The girl from Manila became a champion. The champion from Mallorca broke down watching it happen. And somewhere between those two moments lies something the sport may remember long after both of their careers have become part of tennis history. If this story moved you, if you felt even a small part of what Rafa felt when that final point landed, then you already understand why this channel exists. We find the moments behind the moments, the emotions behind the trophies, and the human beings behind the rankings. Subscribe now and hit the bell. The next story is already waiting, and trust me, you don't want to